about the delay, but a very warm welcome to our panel session, The Cloud Today, the reality of remote production access. And I see this year, we've been discussing this for about 4 years or so now, that we're obviously getting nearer the clouds as we're up in the gallery here today. And I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Roland, partner of AndCubed Limited, which is a consultancy of different people that come together to go out to advise on new technologies. And today we have a learned panel before us. We have on the far end Paul Walland, manager of University of Southampton IT Innovation. And Paul's been in the industry many years. He's got years of experience in leadership of research and technology teams, and he's been at places like Snell and Wilcox and many others, and now at IT Innovations, leading the field in great academic research, and obviously is on many committees that set standards and set all the parameters for new technologies. Then next to him is Darren Wolfson, coming this way to me. He's the Group Director of Technology at Pinewood Studios, and Darren again has been in the industry for many, many years. He was at Molyneux and took it on from one level to another, becoming its Director of Technology, and then moving on to Pinewood to get Pinewood into a digital age. Obviously, as you know, Pinewood's been in a film studio and now has to move on. It still shoots feature films, but we're using different types of media to shoot that, not film so much these days, but digital techniques, and Darren's there pioneering the way again into new technologies. And next to Darren, coming this way again, is Dr. James Cain, and he is Principal Software Architect at one of the leading manufacturers, Quantel. And Dr. James has been in the industry for many years, working in research and development, and he provides marvellous solutions for people like the BBC, ESPN and WDR, and he's been one of the founding lead researchers for Quantel for QTube, which enables people to edit their content anywhere on the planet from any sort of remote device. Very clever technology, and we'll hear more about that as we go along. And Ben sorts us out. We'll be back to you. And actually, Ben is the next person who is here with me. Chief Technical Officer of Sohonet. It's good we've got a good technical guy with us. Ben's been in the industry again for many years, and Ben's an Oscar and Emmy awarding person from the team at Lightworks. I don't know if any of you remember Lightworks, but it was one of the first sort of film type editing systems in the electronic area, and he developed the core technology there, and then he's gone on to Sohonet, and he's into delivering files anywhere around the planet now, being able to connect us up to take our working global. And then as we come to Peter Wilson, Peter's CEO of HDDC, and Peter's been in the industry almost as long as I have.
Right.
Yes. And he was in universities such as Portsmouth, the Royal College of Art, National Film and School Television during his academic career. Then he was in Sony for many years, researching high-definition television long before anybody really understood what it was. And Peters was at Snell and Wilcox and developed many of their standards conversion products, up converters and down converters, and has been leading the way there. And now Peters has a consultancy at HDDC, where he's chairs many committees, SIMPT and European Digital Cinema Forum, and obviously is a leading light in the way we're moving into file systems and cloud operations.
I'm also an Emmy.
And you've an Emmy as well, sorry. Yes, a shared Emmy piece. It's not on your thing, I've forgotten about that, but well done. So we've got a marvellous team of people here to come and talk to us about the way the cloud is going forward. And firstly, to speak about it is Darren from Pinewood Studios.
So, by way of a sort of brief introduction, and from my point of view, working out of the studios at Pinewood, I think the fact that we're all sat here 3 or 4 years on, having an exceedingly similar debate, is a bit of an indictment on the way that cloud is perceived, certainly by our industry. Cloud, amongst certainly my clients and customers, is considered to be a fairly dirty word. And I think what we try to do now is refer to it much more in the terms of remote as opposed to cloud-based. The idea, not that stuff is disappearing into the ether, but it's just not with you right now. And I think the key for our industry is that we need to know exactly where it is. So processing or storing remotely are now much more viable options. Predominantly, I think, due to the fact that reliable high-speed networks now exist, which previously made it quite difficult for us to work at high resolution with storage and processing that is basically right next to us. The real challenge, I think, for the cloud and remote is a cultural change. My customers certainly are still exceedingly uncomfortable about losing control and ownership, if you like, of their own content. And I think, as most of us know who work on people's content, having that in your equipment gives you a huge opportunity to do other stuff with it. So content owners are a bit obsessive, certainly the ones we work with, about pushing them away from where they are. But the example I always give, really, when I'm talking to people about the cultural change, if you like, is to consider electronic banking and to consider how perhaps our parents or our grandparents might have considered the idea that they were going to go out to work and that the remuneration for that work would be this number that went up in this electronic bucket, and that they never really saw any money, and it was all just held somewhere else. And I think once one can become comfortable with that concept, then remote working can really work. I think probably, as the guys are going to talk about in a moment, technology is no longer the thing that's holding us back. It exists at the moment and it works well. It's just simply us, we're holding ourselves back in this area.
Okay, so we're going to welcome now Dr. James. Yes, you can come up, you've got the slides, we've just got to get back into the beginning slide and your beginning slide.
Hello, my name's James, and I'm going to pick up on Darren's points and go techie, because I'm a techie. So actually, the thing in cloud that's interesting from my point of view is the way we put things on disks, the way we do storage. Because we've got a file-based workflow industry. And the storage in cloud, you can create media and you can read it. But you can't update it, you can't mutate it, but actually deleting it is quite hard as well. There's no delete button on Google. If you put something on Facebook, it'll be there forever. Even if you delete it, it's on the Google disks forever, in effect. And actually, another technology sort of impact which you could consider is actually indexing. If you're indexing 2 petabytes of storage, which is quite a normal sort of size, 20 petabytes, the index is more important than the data in a way. Imagine going to a library with 1 million books and no index. Where are you going to find your book? So it's that indexing is actually who owns the index. It's quite an issue. So then you look at workflows, and we've got this file-based workflow replacing tape-based workflow. But actually the workflow wasn't that dissimilar. So it's a bit like the fire of London. We razed our city to the ground 400 years ago and rebuilt all the houses in exactly the same place. We could have had a nice palatial sort of structured road system like Paris, but no, we have to have everything in the same because no one could agree who would give up their land. You can't change your workflow even though you change your technology. But can we reproduce the file-based workflows with cloud? No, because the storage is fundamentally different. The way we do things with files doesn't work the same way in the cloud. So we can't really necessarily support file-based workflows, yet economics are going to make us do that. But actually, in a way, the fact you're in here is good, but there's a generational thing that's about to happen. So Max Planck spotted this a long time ago. You can't change people's minds, you have to wait for them to die. And that's what's going to happen. The Facebook generation will come up and will tell us how the new workflows will work, because they won't be used to this file-based workflow, because these guys here are going to tell us what to do.
Okay, we're now going to hear from Paul Walland, who's going to give us some more insight.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to add any illumination, but the sky just gets a bit cloudy actually. That's possible. But essentially, I just wanted to cover some of the sort of ups and downs, if you like, in cloud, which follows on from what some of the others have said as well. But thank you, Apple. So the animation didn't actually transfer from PC to Apple. This is one of the problems, isn't it, that we're still having. I might just come to that in a minute. But essentially, what I think is important about the cloud is that people do see benefits to cloud working in some way or another. And as Darren said, we've been 4 years, we had like this project, we were looking at ways of people operating out. And it's clear that if you're a professional using what you might loosely term cloud resources, has some benefits. You can see how it could be useful. You can see that the little guys who can't afford to have petabytes of storage and they, those gigacycles available to them can get on the cloud and they can access resources. So you can do stuff without having to be joined on to a big part of the industry to access all of those facilities, which is great because it kind of democratises what you can do, and you don't have to keep upgrading your own resources. You don't have to run down to Dixon's and buy yet more processing power because somebody's come in with a job that's going to be finished tonight, and you haven't got enough power to do it. So you've got the flexibility, and like I said there, they offer inbuilt backup. I might come back to that as well. And if you're a consumer, remember that there's a much stronger consumer drive, in the sense not stronger consumer acceptance, perhaps wrongly some of us might imagine, because you can forget completely about all that nausea that you had at home with all these devices and the wires and everything else. Nobody actually wants that. I want to have a Blu-ray DVD and I want to connect it to the network, and suddenly I've got stuck with it, so I've got loads of those cables and all that sort of stuff. And can I get rid of that by saying, well, actually, I've got a dumb terminal, but I'll connect it to the cloud, everything will be okay, and somebody else can worry about it for me, and I can access all that stuff anytime I want, anyhow, so that's absolutely fine. And it's all secure because somebody's looking after it for me in the cloud, and I don't need to worry about it. I just give them money, and they're going to offer me services in the future, and we've seen it starting to come up, so I can control my house over the cloud, and I can watch webcams and see the burglars taking stuff out, and all those things that you can do over the cloud. So there's perceived benefits. However, of course, this isn't going to reveal the way that I'd hoped, so I'll just talk through it because we've only got a few minutes anyway. But there are a whole pile of challenges. I think it would be great if today we kind of think about what those real challenges are, because we talk about guaranteed quality of service. Who the hell's guaranteeing that? Because if I'm devolving content out to the cloud, or access to that content out to the cloud, I can't control the quality service. That's whoever's providing the cloud services for me. But I've got customers that I've sold on the basis of delivered quality. That's a real problem. And how do we address that? Content migration. So who's going to look after that for me as the standards change, as formats change, as the OS changes, as I try to go between Macs and PCs and it doesn't work the way I expected? Who's managing that if I haven't got the content there and I'm relying on somebody in the cloud to actually do it for me? How secure is the data when it's out there? What assurances can they give me that my content is safe in their cloud and they're not going to go out of business, they're not going to sell out to somebody else? I don't know. There's some really fascinating challenges around this issue of the geographical location. As somebody, when we were talking earlier in the speaker room, kind of alluded to this as well, that it can have legal implications. Do I know where the actual storage is located? Because if, say it's something I'm doing for Red Hot XXX channel and I happen to have it on a server in Saudi, is that a bit of a problem? Or it might be a tobacco advert and somebody's got a server in the north of Sweden, which is a lot more likely, and actually tobacco advertising you can't process in Sweden. So you may not know it, but there may well be problems, limitations associated with where this stuff is actually being looked after for you. And how do you make sure, never mind the devices, how do you make sure that people are accessing that content, people that can get at it? Is it really you? Is it somebody else? Who are they? How do I know that? How do I manage those things when I'm not in control of the cloud, I'm just using it? Somebody comes along with their iPad, or they come along with their Android device, or they come along with their PC, or they come along with their network TV, all those different devices. I've got to be able to access those, and I'm doing it via a third party. Another challenge, how do I manage the relationships that I've got with them, technical and contractual, to make sure that all carries on working? Who do I beat up when it goes wrong? I don't know, and we've got to work that out. And in a sense, finally, because contracts and licensing is another issue. If I want to run something remotely, a render remotely on the cloud, most render software won't allow me to do it because there's conditions built in that says I can't host for third-party access. And then the cost structures is the other point. How do you predict and manage your own business when you may well have a completely different cost structure and sort of thing James is talking about as well? You've got to have a totally different mindset if you're going to get benefit out of the cloud, if you're going to work in there. You need to be able to obviously optimize your business, but what sort of cost structure are you using? Have you got a subscription model? Have you got a transaction-based model? Every time I use the cloud, I get charged for it. Suddenly the job's twice as big as I expected. Suddenly the bill is twice as big as I expected. How can I manage a business like that? And again, we need to work out how we're going to manage those things. We can't duck those issues. They're really important ones. So, I think today is really about how we get the benefits, including there are benefits and opportunities, but how do we overcome the drawbacks, the things that we've got to face up to if we're going to make it work? Can we do it? Don't know. That's my 10 pound.
Just follow straight on.
Okay, first. Cain from Sohonet will come and try and tell us that it's all right, I hope, or not maybe.
Well, we'll see.
We don't know before it leaves.
So the cloud today, the reality of remote production and where we are in accessing content. So everyone talks about everything as a service, databases, queues, software, applications, platforms, infrastructure, and all that sort of stuff. Object storage, and there's all sorts of different bits and pieces. Issues. Well, one of the big things that a lot of if you're talking about the film studio side of stuff, they want to know where is my data. And there are, as we were saying, legal implications. If you're exporting stuff out of the EU and you're processing it in different locations, there's quite a few legal implications involved in that. So it does matter. And how are you going to get to your stuff? Because it needs to be quick. So the reality is media's big generally, media's generally I/O bound, and your tools need high-speed access to that. So what approaches have people taken in the past? Well, actually, let's go through speed first, actually. High-speed makes storage work over long distances. If you look at LTO standards, there's just some numbers on this. LTO 5, which is the current one, is about a gigabit a second. That scales out, there's a roadmap for years to go. LTO 7 is about 2.5 gigabits a second. eSATA and these sorts of technologies. You can see the sorts of speeds that they go at. We do some object storage, and that goes at about 10 gigabits a second per head at the moment. Applications. So people have been doing software as a service for years and years and years and years. If you look at it, depending on what, I'm sure you'll see lots of them with cloud makes their name now. Nowadays called cloud. You see within the film industry there's two main accounts packages. They're remotely located, they have been for years, and people have been using that for ages. And bizarrely on feature films, the accountants seem to be the ones that are always after the most connectivity to begin with, and won't give it to the visual effects people. Then you've got proxies and dailies, which is ways of working with high resolution stuff and making it so that you can look at it locally over low bandwidth stuff. We've seen quite a lot going on with archiving into the cloud. We have several customers that have been pushing stuff non-stop into the cloud. Various big studios moving their content because they decided it was probably best not to have it all in one place when you have things like fires. And then you get on to the really scary stuff where the film studios have specifications on how you have to work with their data, and the productions don't necessarily follow quite the same path. So you'll see people just using Dropbox to move frames backwards and forwards. And then you get into having to lock this down and stop them doing that sort of stuff and give them tools that they can use instead to work with. And then we have various customers, and as James, I'm sure, will go on to later, with the QTube technologies he's been doing, the Chili Beans, the Beam TVs, the Clears. There's loads of people. And that's me.
Okay, Peter, give us your perspective.
Quick as well. So recently, about 2-3 weeks ago, I was following up on a project that several of us involved in called Muppets, and basically it's a digital marketplace project, and I re-interviewed several of the post houses that I first we were first working with, and asked them, well, what about clouds? So we can talk about who uses them, what's wrong with clouds in post, what can a generic cloud operator do, and what can private operators, cloud operators do. So who uses clouds? Well, corporate websites, IX, so iPhone, iPad, Google users, bedroom warriors that want to have more storage cheaply in their bedrooms. But everybody said not professional post houses. None of the professional post houses that I worked through would go anywhere near a generic cloud. When I say generic cloud, I mean an Amazon or an iCloud, or the stuff that's in the back of the Times, rather than professional. So what's wrong with clouds in post? Well, security, security, security. Roland told me, well, actually I asked him a question a few years ago when we started some of these projects, it was 10 years ago. When you get a big job, let's say Harry Potter, you get 10 shots of Harry Potter, where do you get the artists from? Well, as soon as the word is out in Soho, they queue up at the door. So you've got all these strange people coming to the door wanting jobs to do the rendering or to do the creative design. And a lot of them are much, much higher skilled than many of the IT people would be in the general IT industry. So if you think that you're going to shove all this stuff in a generic cloud and let these really almost inbred hackers free on the data, it's a pretty dangerous thing unless you've actually thought really carefully about what you're doing. And that's not a negative. These guys are incredibly smart, as we see in the movies, because they do incredible work. Cost of high-speed access. You know, you're not going to be able to do any useful work on a big movie with ADSL, 10 megabits at the most, particularly if it's asymmetric, which most of it is. Some render programs need special processors. So, for example, if your memory, I think, uses CUDA processors, well, has your generic Amazon cloud got access to 1,000 CUDA processors? I doubt it, unless you spend a lot of money on it. They have now. Well, I don't know what the cost is, but it's not going to be regular daily rate. Some programs licensed per processor. So it sounds great, you know, it's only £1,400 a year for Pixar's RenderMan, but you might use 1,000 processors. And then, of course, some of the license terms prohibit third-party usage. And who's going to actually track all the license terms? If you're going to be turning processors on and off and making storage requests, processor requests, etc., etc. So fundamentally, speed costs, petabyte stores are common in Soho. People do it themselves. A lot of people would like not to have to do that themselves, or would like access to extra resources, but it's not been very easy. And I'm mostly talking about generic clouds here. And we did that one already. So what can generic cloud operators do? Well, not a lot really, because their systems are run for different reasons. You know, the Amazon cloud and the Google cloud is not really run to keep the people in Soho happy. What can private cloud operators do? And when I say private cloud, guys, I mean Pinewood effectively got private cloud, Sohonet or all those. Yeah, well, you heard what Darren said about not calling it a cloud. But Ben is able to connect into the NOT cloud at very high speed if you want to do it. So we move from a generic thing that's sold by everybody that's absolutely useless to a very bespoke, specialised computing resource that can be operated by people that know what they're doing and can actually make it work. So maybe you have to physically quarantine user areas rather than put them all in one lump. You've got to be able to configure flexible computing technology, so as we said, CUDA processors might be needed. So Amazon have got those now if you rent them. Connect at very high speeds with reasonably priced networks. I was told it costs something like $2,000 a month just to connect to the Amazon cloud at a gigabit per second. That's before you put any network data through it. It's just a fundamental connection. Manage processor assignment licenses, which I don't do today. Make the costs very clear and maybe pay as you go. You know, you don't want to get a bill at the end of the month that's spread over 20 clients. You've got no way to work out which client used it the most. Real 24/7 support. One of the very interesting things in the discussion for Muppets was talking about connectivity. Well, if you're connected via BT lines to Hollywood, fine. If you're connected by Sohonet, fine. But if you've got a problem, you'd much rather you're connected via Sohonet, because when you pick up the phone, someone there understands what your problem is. Whereas if you pick up BT, you might get 15 people in the call centre a long way away that don't actually know what your problem is and how to fix the issues. So it points to very specialist systems. And as we saw, identify the physical location. Where's my data now? You know, is it in India? Is it in China? I hope not. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much to the panel. Now we'll take questions and open it up to the panel discussion, so we can get some more out of this as to where the cloud is going to be usable in the way it is because of legal issues and security of data, and how do you know you've deleted it, where is it in archive, naming conventions, being able to track your content in the future. So I'm sure you've got some questions, so please raise your hands and then we can get the appropriate person to answer it.
Roland, can I perhaps just add?
Yes, please carry on.
I think we've been quite negative about the cloud as we've stood up here. I think James made the point, his little phrase at the end that really death has to become us before, before new ideas can be
That's
taken
always
up.
the way.
And I think we've really adequately demonstrated that, because we appear like complete Luddites, really.
Yes.
I mean, I think if you apply business to this, you know, there are things that are going on in our businesses that mean the type of systems that we're talking about could really help businesses that currently aren't successful become successful. Whether that's because they don't have to make the big investments they need to, or they can share their resources with other people, or perhaps just work slightly more agilely. And so, apart from anything, we either have to overcome these issues, or there will become a generation of people who don't regard them as issues anymore because they simply accept them and work around them or work in different ways. And I think we should consider that in the context of our discussion, because it's about really understanding that this is coming. How do we make the most of it?
I think there's the ultimate pain threshold, isn't there? The bit in the middle. So what you said is absolutely valid, but what's also valid is that the cloud operators have to listen to the requirements of the industry and actually start to understand why people have certain positions. And over time, there'll be a kind of coming together.
Oh, I disagree with that.
I'm sure
So
you do.
the money in computer science, we are teeny. We're just a little fraction of 1% in terms of the IT spend in R&D.
I'm sure you are, yeah.
And so the way that cloud is built isn't for our industry. We have to eat whatever they offer us.
Talk food.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I'm working with a number of customers now who are trying to build workflows for the Olympics, and they can get 2 or 3 people into the Olympic Stadium, but they've got a team of 30 to make TV. What are they going to do about it? Well, they need to work remotely. And if you've solved 100 meters or 1,000 meters, if you do it right, you might have solved 1,000 kilometers just as easily. So actually, they can stay at home a lot of the time. So we're beginning to solve geography as a problem. It won't become an issue like it is at the moment. It doesn't matter where you are, as long as you're fairly well connected. And so you can stay in Brazil, I'm not saying which customer it is, or wherever. You know, then you can not have to make your staff move as much. And that saves huge amounts of money. You need less tickets, all the other stuff that go with moving people around.
There are companies that want to get into offering generic cloud to our industry for prestige reasons. And they will have to adapt just as much as Darren said that the users will have to adapt.
But what we need to do as manufacturers in our industry is take generic bits like cloud and spin them. Not marketing, it's redo the tech bit as well, so that you can offer a remote access. You happen to be using cloud technology underneath, but you're not particularly, you can only take what the clever people in California build and then twist it a bit. But so the generic cloud offering as it is not useful, I would say to this industry. But using that technology and building workflow, that's our job to help media creatives tell stories. But their file systems they used to offer us and still do aren't particularly fit for what we're trying to do, and the cloud storage is actually more fit for what we're trying to do. But the politics around cloud, great. So we need to get over that, which is your point.
And there's some interesting stuff going on with this. That it gives you agility is the main thing that it gives you. So if you've got no computers and you have a small wind farm, you can now go bid on jobs that are much, much, much larger than traditionally you need a supercomputer in your machine room. You don't necessarily need that anymore. You're getting to the stage where you can go, okay, I want this many computers. Right, creatives go out and sell to all of these different productions, and if I get it, fine, I can just sign here and start using the resource. But then you also have the problem that it's a very bursty industry, and the aggregation across lots of people means that you have to adapt to have multiple different workflows on platforms, which is where you're going to start using much more generic cloud stuff.
I think pick up on Darren's point as well, that part of the problem is actually using the word cloud, because that has a certain meaning, and it invites you to say, well, we can't use the cloud because the cloud has this common platform or something else, as opposed to saying what we need is to take advantage of the technology that lets us do things that we couldn't do before. And if we say it's cloud, suddenly we're thinking Amazon and problems associated with accessing, location, and all those other things, as opposed to saying, well, how do we use it? If there's a problem, how do we get over that problem? So it is a viewpoint that we have to take as well. Maybe just using the word cloud is not the problem.
Cloud is a bit of the problem, isn't it?
So we've got a marketing problem.
Yes.
It's not a technology problem.
It's not technology, because you can have security as well, can't
Yeah, absolutely.
James, you can have security within the system.
Yes, so we're negotiating with studios and things about getting internet access into quite secure areas safely, and it can be done if you build the right sort of layers of walls and things, firewalls, and then you've got these grey hat people, pen testers who come along and test to see if you're. It's a bit like mafia. You know, they come along and they extort you, saying, "Oh, we broke in, give some money, we'll fix it for you."
Yes,
No, you can get there eventually.
we've used those.
Yeah. So the technology is actually really, really fit, but the word cloud, I think, as the theme is slightly poisoned.
Come up with a new word.
Cloud.
The question as well is whether it's like the burglar alarm salesman coming in who knocks on the door and tells you about some horrific burglary down the road where residents of the house were held at gunpoint for many hours, and would you like to buy a burglar alarm? Much of the story and the worry around cloud is its potential security risks and anecdotal problems. Whether any of it actually truly exists, whether anyone who did inadvertently process pornography in Saudi Arabia has actually been sent to jail, and someone processing a tobacco commercial in Sweden has actually been caught in it, I seriously doubt. And data is normally not stolen in the way that a lot of us are led to believe it is by people hacking computers. It's stolen because an individual inadvertently writes their password, or writes their password underneath their computer.
I'll tell you what used to happen now. Quite often it was some of the creatives are really excited about their content they've created on the latest Harry Potter film, visual effects, and they'll send it to a mate to say, look what I'm doing. It's the way it escapes, and you can have traceability of where things have come from. And a lot of the studios I know, we've talked about security and things, when the push comes to the shove to get a production out and they need to see a viewing copy or something, they send it over the open internet and don't worry about it. I shouldn't say that, but that's what happens in real life.
Unless you have a deadline.
Yes, if you're close to a deadline, somebody says, well, just email it to me or something, or send it over the internet.
The traditional thing in filling in the MPAA or this type of stuff is, do you use insecure protocols? Yes, when you make them.
Yes.
Because the traditional process is back to the studios.
So are there any questions?
Just an observation. Heard all of this speak, and I agree with you. Largely, it's extremely negative what's coming out. So collectively, we probably need to get more positive about the bad thing, which are most anal about security. And over the last few months, we've seen a couple of major European bank houses start going to the cloud. Small ways, but they're taking those steps. So if that has an industry, from a security perspective, they can start doing that. I don't see why remote production access should have that problem. And cloud operators are taking steps. So the whole EU Data Privacy Act was a big problem, especially for our customers in the EU. But it's around it, right? So Patriot Act is always going to be a problem. Anybody can get access to it. But that's only a problem if you think of the Amazons of the world or Windows, Azure's of the world. But if you think the rack space is a UK-based entity. They are not subject to Patriot.
They are in the US.
But not the UK entity. So as long as you're working with the UK, your data is not subject to Patriot. So there are ways around it. So I think collectively we probably need to get more positive around this and start looking at specific areas where you can actually start looking at, where you can, it's if you got it right again, it's all economics. Right? At some point of time, the economics are going to matter so much that you will have to look at actively moving things to the cloud. And the sooner you start looking at it, the better it is. So it's all very well to look at all the negatives of the world and say, no, that's not for us. Right? But unless you start looking at positives and start moving bits and pieces into the cloud, it's not going to work. The other perspective I have on this is it has to be product-led as well. So a lot of the products that we use today, right, if these vendors actively start looking at how they can move into the cloud, small bits of it would start with airtime sales. So you take airtime sales products, scheduling products, start with, right? They are very good, easy candidates to move to the cloud. Right? So it has to be product-led, and I think collectively as an industry, we probably need to start pushing the product vendors to start looking at moving things to the cloud. And it's a big play for them as well. So tapping emerging markets is extremely easy if you've got a very basic offering on the cloud. Customers can get in very quickly, right? And probably at some point can understand it will be very clear. Right? So that's just an observation. So I think we need to get a lot more positive about this. There is a lot of good things, and we need to start looking at them and stop focusing so much on the negatives that we kind of, we even probably talking about this for the last 2 years, came here again. We'll probably be doing the same discussion and talking about the same things next year. Right? We need to kind of stop that.
I'd say I'm not particularly negative about it. I'd say we have people that have been using that sort of stuff, remote working forever. I mean, people have had their dailies in the cloud for years, cloud, hosted solutions. I mean, it depends on what you refer to cloud as. I mean, if it's pure cloud where you're talking about API access into remote machines and object-based storage, there's people using object-based storage and that sort of stuff already. You're starting to see some of the brand people are starting to move into the cloud side. The big problem is the I/O side of it, but that's solvable. I mean, that's an expense issue more than anything else. And the technology is increasing on that sort of stuff.
And there's a massive
10 gig Ethernet on is 200% year on year decrease in price. So one of the big constraints before was the available bandwidth into the cloud. That's going away because bandwidth is becoming so much cheaper. And now that you have 100 gig Ethernet and the evolutions that you'll have on from there, it means that you can bring these resources closer. And I think part of the stuff that we were talking about before is a lot of it was difficult before because you couldn't get the I/O performance that might possible. I think what's changing is getting the I/O performance into those sorts of solutions. If you can get that, then it works.
And there's also this perception. Communities think cloud, they think the public cloud. And the word public cloud itself is a massive PR and marketing issue around it. Public cloud is not really public in the sense that you think that it's open to everyone can do it. But cloud actually three different types of cloud that I've been looking at. The public cloud, for whatever it's worth, that's what it's called. Where you're looking at hosted somewhere, we have control where it's hosted somewhere, and you are able to kind of, you have a sandbox around it, so it's got your data that The second is the private cloud. Right? Private cloud is a cloud. What do people say? Yes, it is a cloud. You can manage it as a cloud. It has pretty much the same benefits, not all of it, but a lot of the benefits that you get from public cloud. And there's something in between which is the hybrid. I think the hybrid is one area where you've got a massive play. Because the whole idea of the hybrid cloud is there are some things which can be public. You can leverage economies of scale, using those bits of the workflow, those bits of the workflow to the public cloud, and keep everything else in a private cloud. So we solve problems around I/O, around speed, around bandwidth issues, taking private cloud to some bits of it, and reaching out to the public cloud to the rest. It could also be a burst. Right? Suddenly you need a lot of processing power to get to the cloud as well. So I think that the perception of everything being public, I think that needs to be gradual.
Can we get Paul Walland to give an answer?
Yeah, I was
Or
just
to
going
make a comment.
to go back to the cloud salesman here. And you're talking about the cloud cube and these things. And the point I was going to make, which goes back to about a few minutes ago, that actually you're right, we shouldn't be negative, and we should look actually on a business-led opportunity, not on technology. We don't use cloud just because it's there and because it's an option, because the salesman tells us that we should be using it. We need to use it because it makes business sense for us to do so. I think Ben was making the point that it didn't make business sense in the past. It's starting to make more business sense now. Those dynamics are changing, and we should always remember that you're using it because you want to work more efficiently, you want to make a better profit, you want to do things better, whatever your business reason, but it's never going to have to be a technical reason or anything else.
So when I was in, before I left work, the company I was at, we just physically ran out of electricity in London. We had 1.5 megawatts of power. Building couldn't get any more, and so massive constraint, and that was being operated 24/7. Cost of electricity was enormous, and we just moved off-site all the rendering. So this was sort of a way of moving to cloud. We couldn't go to cloud at that time because it wasn't there. And I must say, these guys, a lot of these guys here with us today, have been very positive about cloud because they've worked on this Muppets project, and you don't have to wait for them to die because they're all really pro the cloud and have been developing technologies for it. But there's a lot of things thrown up about security and other IP and who retains this and how do you delete the data. But there are ways around that, and it will be business driven. The business will lead the whole way forward to take us to a new way of operating. And many people, come along and have said to me, we need another 100 terabytes of storage for 10 days and to do this production. We've got to finish it off. They've been shooting more than we knew. Everybody knows about that. You come in with more data to put onto the storage for editing. Where are we going to put it? People want to leave the job here longer. They haven't got all the shots for their program, or they own some IP in the content. And what are you going to do about it? Well, we don't have room to buy it. We don't even have the resource to buy it. If we can rent it, that would be fabulous if it can go off outside. We're not in purchasing storage and running big storage farms and all the rest of it, and render farms. All those services will be provided. Ben?
I mean, to that point, we've provided solutions for people where they've had the 80 terabyte sliding block, a sliding block puzzle where you sit there and you go, here are all of my systems, and I need to move through and refresh all of these. And I need 80 terabytes, 100 terabytes of disk space that I can use while I'm moving everything around. We provide solutions for people like that remotely, so that you can just go here, here's a 10 gig connection to it, you can move your data onto there, you can keep it on there for a week, a month, and you pay on a utility basis. I mean, that's what it's all about, is being able to move to utility basis. Because they've sat there and said, well, we've got another 100 terabytes that we don't need now, and we've got all of the associated problems of looking after all of the data on that. And they're the sorts of solutions that come out of this, at least initially, and then you've got the archive stuff.
So it's a trust issue, I think. And
Yes.
I think this is what it comes down to. You brought up the finance industry again. I think while there are big similarities, I think there are big differences. I think the inherent IPR within the product in the film industry does make the data somehow different to the data that financial institutions are storing. But nonetheless, there are also a lot of similarities. But if you're going to give something that you own that you consider valuable to somebody else to look after and store for you, you need to trust them. And I think that's what we're beginning to see. Remote hosting and storage, cloud-based storage, had some reasonably high-profile problems when it started out. And as a result, I think a lot of people who consider their assets to be very valuable don't trust those people. I suspect when individuals want to store lots of data and they ring Sohonet up, they do trust Sohonet, which is why they're exceedingly happy to allow you to manage their data for them.
It's also I'll tell them where it is, so that you get away from the whole geographical problem.
And what we will begin to see is there will be people who build a reputation in our industry and who are trusted. And that will be a combination of the processing, the storage and the networking all combined together. And that is what will, I suspect, lead our industry solution, built on top of generic products, but done in our own sort of way.
And at that point, time has run out, as usual, and we'll have to come out of the clouds now. And next year, we'll trust that the sun's come out and that more of it's being used. I know it is. So let us give thanks to our panellists who've given so much today and turned around and seen the light. Well, we've all seen the light. We'll just give them a round of applause. And thank you all for your attention. And if you need to speak to anyone, please feel free to have a one-to-one afterwards.